Like, we're on? Sorry, we were talking.
Yeah, all right, fine.
Excuse us.
Yeah, all right. We'll
No, but you can play
we'll pick
it later.
We'll pick up that
no.
conversation later.
All right, fine.
So no more talk about Tiny Dancer unless you want my
That.
involuntary reflex action.
Zip it.
All right. Yesterday, I mean, the jokes were coming a mile a minute. Some of the nation's best comedians assembled in Aspen to be interviewed by Mrs. Greenspan and Lester Holt. You had headliners like Dan Coates, who's a great comedian.
And Christopher Wray, FBI
Christopher
director
Wray,
turned stand-up comedian.
Another great comedic actor. So one of the skits they did was...
I have 5 here, so which
Dan Coates finding out that Putin is coming to town in the fall.
It's hysterical.
Say, we have some breaking news. The White House has announced on Twitter that Vladimir Putin is coming to the White House in the fall.
Say that again?
Oh, you, Lucy!
Explaining todo.
Did I hear you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's his signature line.
That's going to be special.
There it is. Zing. That's like, so that's going to be special to Dan Coates is like, what you talking about, Willis, is to Gary Coleman.
And then
that's classic Coates.
The Holt-Ray routine, were you thinking about ever resigning?
There have also been stories that you threatened to resign.
I'm a low-key, understated guy, but that should not be mistaken for what my spine is made out of.
I don't get
you
it.
have
Leave it. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
Jeez. Those guys.
The laugh track going the entire time.
It was like they cut and pasted Seth Meyers' studio audience. All right, for more on the topic, if he can keep a straight face, I mean, because giggles are sort of contagious. We're pleased to be joined by Ed Morrissey, senior editor of HotAir.com and columnist for the week. Ed, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I mean...
Do you want a laugh track during this interview?
I can always use a laugh track. You know,
there it is.
There you go.
There it is. So, who knew that Ray and Coates were a couple of wild and crazy guys? This week just keeps getting weirder.
It's been pretty strange, and during this presidency, that's saying something. This has been a very strange week, and having that bombshell dropped on Coates in the middle of the Aspen Security Forum, that is maybe one of the stranger things, because you would think that the White House would have checked in with the DNI prior to talking about inviting Vladimir Putin to the White House.
Yeah, but then where would the situational irony be? Then it wouldn't have been funny if he knew.
Well, it's true. And
you got to go for the joke here, yeah.
You got to. Yeah, these days, you really do have to go for the laughs. I think that's right.
So what is this idea? Putin said on Monday that he wants to interview, he would let us interview the 12 people named in the indictment, the 12 Russians, if we in exchange let his people speak with the former U.S. ambassador to Russia and others, including Bill Browder.
This was a terrible thing to let sit around, and the immediate reaction to that should have been no, and heck no, or stronger variations thereof. You don't put former ambassadors into the hands of hostile intelligence services, certainly not willingly. And we spent a lot of time and effort and money making sure that ambassadors and former ambassadors and people who haven't had access to classified information don't fall into the hands of hostile intelligence services. And I'm not a big fan of Michael McFaul's politics. He's been, he's been very vocal about how he feels about Donald Trump. I understand that the White House doesn't probably care for him very much, but that's besides the point. He's a former American diplomat, and you just don't do that. And it puts Vladimir Putin's what's the best way of putting this? His own conspiracy thinking at the same level as American intelligence, which has shown that the Russians have been conducting hostile operations in the U.S. aimed at our election systems in various different ways for the last few years, and honestly for the last few decades. But I mean, they were more successful than usual in 2016.
I'm having a hard time who hard time figuring out who to take seriously other than Putin, because I certainly can't take the former intel heads of the various agencies under Obama, from the hysterics of Brennan and Clapper and Hayden, to the the sliminess of Comey. I can't take them seriously, and I'm having a hard time this week taking the president seriously after the retraction and this kind of not communicating with the State Department about the McFaul matter, not communicating to DNI Coates about this forthcoming second meeting with Putin. This is sort of all strikes me as like a bad running episode of Get Smart or something.
Well, I think this is what happens when you have a president that likes to wing it. And, I mean, this is Donald Trump's style. He's a very extemporaneous guy, and I think he likes to just go by his gut instinct. And he's not somebody who trusts even his closest aides with decisions and with distributed authority, right? And so this is what you get when you get a guy who's just basically going off his gut all the time. It's unpredictable, which opens up opportunities both for yourself and for your global opponents like Vladimir Putin. And I agree with you. It's hard to take this type of thing seriously. The back and forth that was coming from the White House about what was said, what wasn't said, what Donald Trump thinks about the American intelligence, what he doesn't think about American intelligence. All I can tell you is that I spoke with Senator Lankford earlier this week, Representative Gallagher. Both of them serve on Homeland Security and Intel committees in Congress. And, Republicans ran these Intel Committee investigations into what happened in 2016, and they all came to the same conclusion as the intelligence community. The Russians ran operations that didn't impact the outcome of the election, but these were hostile acts that were intended to undermine confidence in American democracy. And I don't know why the White House can't distinguish that from the idea of collusion, because they're two very different things, and they're easy to distinguish. And yet, because of the collusion allegations, Donald Trump seems intent on undermining those conclusions and undermining the people who reached those conclusions.
Do you think that President Trump knows the history behind Vladimir Putin, or did he just forget about him? I mean, he's a murderous dictator, and he acted as if he was just, average Joe, just, It's okay.
No, I think it's a great question, Amy. But I think it's more that he's a very much in the moment kind of guy, and Vladimir Putin's the dictator of Russia, whatever you want to call him. He's the dictator of Russia. We got to be able to engage and do deals with Russia. This is Donald Trump's thinking, and so therefore I'm just going to treat him like somebody that we can deal with, and hopefully that will work to help us deal with him. And I mean, it's an extremely pragmatic and not very principled approach, but it might be a realistic approach. It could be a successful approach, but you can't have that approach without remembering who Putin is. I mean, you have to know who he is. You have to remember that this is a guy who's a bloodthirsty autocrat who has been killing people who disagree with him for the last, what was Litvinenko in 2004. So for the last 14 years at least, he's got a track record of killing people who dissent and speak out against him. And so it's fine to say Russia's too important to ignore, and we have to find ways to reach some sort of agreements with them, but not without saying Putin's a great guy, and we kill people too, which is something that Donald Trump said quite a while back. Yeah. I mean, that equivalency is dangerous.
Yeah, well, exactly. And we've had some callers too comparing the CIA to the KGB, and I mean, it's just so ignorant. Because I'm sure Putin's bloody hands predate 2004 too. Let's not forget whence he comes. But on the other side of the ledger, though, you have Democrats doing their best to minimize the damage of some of the self-inflicted wounds President Trump's. The combination of over-the-top calls of treason. the conspiracy theories, the Manchurian Candidate stuff, the bug soccer ball. And then the second prong of the problem they have is they got Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez as the face of the party, where the party's energy is, and she's not presenting very well under scrutiny. So the Democrats have their share of problems, too, on these matters.
Well, go figure that a 28-year-old bartender really doesn't understand what the unemployment rate does. I mean, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, that's sort of the desperation of the Democratic Party. They seized on Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez without even vetting her at all to find out whether she was competent, and she's clearly not competent. But you have a really good point here, Dan. And what I would say is that Donald Trump is uniquely blessed by the political opponents that he has at this particular point in time. When you've got John Brennan screaming treason, treason, and you've got James Clapper saying something maybe not quite as ridiculous, but still ridiculous. And when you realize that these were the two guys who were supposed to have stopped the Russians from doing this in the first place, yeah, I mean, it's insane. And what it does is it undermines the ability of people to offer rational and on-point criticisms of what Donald Trump is doing, because it basically allows Trump, his supporters, and even some of his more rational critics, they have to go through that, treason hysteria first and debunk that, because you just can't get around that. And the media's shrieking about this stuff. It was bad enough as it was. I mean, this was not a good moment for Donald Trump at all. It was a really bad moment, and it made him look foolish, and it made him look easily manipulable, which is not a good look for a U.S. president. And so those are things that are very eminently criticizable, but the hysteria basically buries that.
He is Ed Morrissey, senior editor for HotAir.com and columnist for The Week. Ed, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.